Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. So today we will be speaking about Mars retrograde, which is actually going to be towards the end of the year though. But Mars will be entering the sign of Gemini on the 20th of August, and it will be spending there almost 8 months. So it's going to be important to speak about that. So this is a free of charge recorded webinar, which I do once a month. It's always about some major planetary alignments. So next month we will be doing one on Saturn in the sign of Pisces, because we're going to start preparing for 2023. There are going to be kind of like big planetary energies happening in 2023. So I'm going to start building those up in the upcoming month to prepare you guys. Great. So I hope everyone is doing well. Mars is a little bit close to my heart at the moment because it's sitting on my Chiron, squaring the ruler of my sixth house. Mars at the moment is in the third house for me, and then I managed to break my knee. So I had to cut my training a little bit short in Thailand. I was meant to be doing an 8-week fitness retreat. Unfortunately, I've completed only 3 weeks, and then now I have to actually postpone the rest of that. But I will be coming back, and then I will finish it once my knee is healed. Actually, it's not too bad, by the way. I mean, it doesn't hurt, I think. Anyway, I don't take the risk. I'm not going to force it, so I'm just going to rest up a little bit with it. Great. So, a couple of announcements before we actually jump right onto the topic, that I will be starting a certification course on relocation astrology. We're going to start on the 15th of August. It will be 8 weeks. I will be giving you a certificate of completion with a little bit of an assignment, just to be sure that you've understood all the planetary alignments and energies, what I actually teach about. One thing which I recommend is that this is going to be, I think, a great class, but ideally it's recommended if you have got an astrology software. If you don't have one, you can still take the class, but at one point you are going to be needed to get an astrology software, because that's just make your life a lot easier if you want to be working with relocation. And this is getting a very popular topic among people. I kind of feel like this year I've done so many relocation charts. People are inquiring about where to live. They want to be making their life easier. And it's not a shock for me, actually, because the prices are going up. You know, the food is extremely expensive, oil, petrol, and all those type of things. So what happens is that people just want to be having a little bit of a cheaper life. So surely I understand why people are deciding to relocate. I kind of feel like you might guys not able to use the chat box. So let me just fix that. And now you can use the chat box also. Okay, so that's one thing. And the other one is, if you are interested in any type of astrological content, I do free webinars a month on my membership page. You pay one monthly fee and then you get free webinars in return. And also you have got different type of discounts. You get weekly reports and so forth. So I recommend checking that out. Great. So Mars in the sign of Gemini. I mean, obviously, Mars usually spends approximately about 6 weeks in each sign. So it's not a biggie, but this time around, it will be spending almost 8 months in the sign of Gemini. So obviously, this is an extended period for Mars. And it usually happens when it goes retrograde. So we want to be exploring the meaning of this Mars in Gemini, because everyone will be affected. Some people will be affected in a different way. And today I would like to focus more on the current cycle, and I'm not going to be looking at historical events as much. But I want to be looking at the current cycle, and I want to show you how to actually work with Mars retrograde periods so that you can have a better understanding of what you are meant to be preparing for. So that's the aim of the lecture. And then at the end, we will be breaking this down for the 12 signs. I'm going to give you a couple of keywords to think about what you might need to be paying attention. Of course, this is going to be just a general description because I don't know your personal chart. And unfortunately, in this webinar, we are not going to be having time to look at personal charts because I'm going to be trying to give you all the information I prepared. I think it's about 30, almost 40 slides in a couple of hours. So one thing which I would like you to do straight away is look at the house position where Mars is going to be spending almost 8 months to start with. But I also would like you to look at where the Scorpio sign is in your chart. And let me just tell you why. The reason why is because the dispositor of Mars, while it's going to be in the sign of Gemini, is going to be Mercury. And Mercury almost at the same time will be entering the sign of Scorpio as well. So therefore, there is going to be a mutual reception happening between Mars and Mercury. So clearly, the Scorpio and the Gemini house cusp are going to be quite emphasized in your chart. So whenever a planet goes into a sign, basically the dispositor, which is the ruler of that original sign, becomes kind of like a planetary host. It's kind of like that planet is the boss, if you like it. Now, Mars moving into the sign of Gemini, which is, by the way, a masculine expression of Mercury, because each planet rules 2 signs from a traditional point of view. Mercury will be ruling Virgo and Gemini. Gemini would be the masculine expression of Mercury, and Virgo would be the feminine expression of the same planet. Now, Gemini is actually a warm and moist planet. So therefore, Gemini is all about fertility. Now, don't think about fertility as in giving birth and so forth, because Gemini is actually the trickster of the 12 signs. So sometimes, kind of like if I was talking about fertility, then I would, it's kind of like the false alarms when we give birth. That would be the Gemini indication that I thought that I had, the water broken and so forth. And then actually it turns out it was just an alarm and so forth. But from a fertility point of view, because of the qualities of the sign, which is warm and moist. So think about that fertility as in something where we kind of give birth to something. And typically this is about ideas or contracts or something which is going to kind of somehow create a physical form. Gemini is one of the 4 double-bodied signs, and I'm going to speak about that a little bit more, why that might become actually important for us. Now, firstly, if you are looking at your own chart and you want to be figuring out whether it's going to be an easy period for you or not so much, I would like you to look at whether your natal Mercury and Mars are in a good communication or not. Because this time around, they are going to be in mutual receptions with each other, which is in modern astrology, it's a great thing. In traditional astrology, not every single mutual reception is great. Okay, so I would like to point that out. In traditional astrology, mutual receptions are a little bit. There are more criteria to have to classify something as mutual reception. So in modern astrology, we would be looking at this Mercury in the sign of Scorpio and Mars in the sign of Gemini is a mutual reception. In traditional astrology, it would not be a mutual reception. I'm not going to speak about this in length. Basically, there are 3 criteria when it comes to traditional astrology. One of them is that they have to have an aspect between each other to have mutual reception. Now, there is no aspect happening between Scorpio and Gemini. So that's one of the reasons why it's actually not a mutual reception. Okay. But if you look at it as from a mutual reception point of view, then I would like you to look at what is the relationship between your Mars and Mercury in your natal chart. If it's a little bit difficult by essential dignity or hard aspects and so forth, this could be actually a little bit more on the challenging side for you. The other reason why probably it's important is because Mercury has got planetary joy in the first house, which is typically a Marsian representation. So surely, though, in that sense, I would say that this kind of like, let's call it as a fake mutual reception from a traditional point of view, is going to be quite potent or on Mundane level surely. Now, what's very interesting is that Mars tends to be going retrograde more often in the sign of Cancer, Leo, or Virgo than, for instance, in the sign of Capricorn, Aquarius, or Pisces. So Capricorn, Aquarius, or Pisces, Mars retrograde tend to be very rare. However, Mars goes retrograde in the sign of Cancer, Leo, and Virgo every 15 years. So there is a little bit of a repetition going on there. It kind of indicates that people who have got Cancer, Leo, or Virgo rising sign, they tend to be going actually through more changes in their lives than, for instance, a Capricorn, Aquarius, or Pisces rising sign. Considering obviously that Mars, what is Mars? It's about kind of like overcoming challenges or initiating something new or turning your life upside down and so forth. So those rising signs tends to be a little bit more, changing their life direction a lot more. Because one thing which you should remember about Mars, that Mars gets up every single morning to become Capricorn, because planet wants to achieve that exaltation position all the time, which is kind of like a euphoria for them. And Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn. So Mars always gets up to achieve something, to create a social status. It is kind of like representing the inner hero within us. And then if you start thinking about what that heroic type of behavior is, hero is about to protect and to serve others. So at the beginning of our life, before actually Mars become a little bit more mature, then it's more about instinctual behavior. It's more about me. Mars tends to be putting himself first. But later on, once Mars kind of grows up, which is actually happening in our mid-20s, Mars should be actually shifting a little bit, and then it should be actually protecting and serving others also. Of course, Mars is not going to be interested in serving and protecting others at the beginning. And one of the reasons is because it's all about, and we're going to go into the history of Mars in a short while, and then that's going to explain why. But Mars is a little bit more into himself all the time. It is about individuality. So Mars doesn't want to be losing individuality by, I don't know, looking at other people's needs. Mars is the type of energy where, you know what, let's say I don't know, 18 years old and I want to be experiencing something. So I'm going to be leaving the family nest behind and I want to try to figure out what I am actually capable of doing on my own. So I want to take risks. I want to get out there and I want to be, am I recording actually? Yes, we are recording. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure. So it gets out into the big worlds, and then maybe a couple of years time it comes back, and then now I'm ready to settle down. I've grown up, I've experienced enough, I slept with enough girls and boys and whatever, and I'm ready to build something tangible. So that's kind of like the psychological process of Mars. Of course, it takes a little bit longer for some, and it takes a little bit shorter for others. But we tend to say that Mars is very impulsive. This is one of the most malefic planets. alongside with Saturn, of course, depending on whether we are in a night chart or a day chart. In a day chart, Mars tends to be the most malefic, just because it even becomes hotter. Daytime, obviously, the sun is shining bright, so it heats Mars up even more, and therefore Mars tends to be creating more tension. It's kind of like, imagine that if the sweat is ruled by Mars, during daytime, we're going to be sweating a lot more than nighttime, right? Because the sun is not burning us. But also, Mars represents something to do with your instincts, the instincts to do something which is going to be to allow you to become who you want to become. It talks about the drive within us. So it wants to act, it wants to excel at something, it wants to live a purposeful life overall. Of course, Mars rules two signs also. One of them is the sign of Aries, the other one is going to be Scorpio. And Aries is the masculine masculine expression of Mars, and Scorpio is the feminine expression. But there is something in common between those two signs. And one thing is that both of them are extremely determined to achieve something. Both of them are interested in power. Now, Mars, what we tend to believe is that it just shows the masculine side of ourselves. And that's to a certain extent true. But the fact that it rules two signs, Mars is also an emotional energy, just it tends to be hiding it, because it kind of feels like that showing vulnerability is actually only for the weak. And that's really what Scorpio is about, right? Scorpio doesn't want to reveal emotions because then it looks like I'm giving my power away to others. Now, there is slight difference going on, of course, between the two signs. One is fiery, the other one is water. So the fire is all about going upwards and the water is going inwards. So obviously these two energies are going to be completely different. But, if we're talking about that Aries for a very short while, then that would be very much about, okay, you know what? I don't think I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to shoot, right? I'm going to grab a gun and then I'm going to shoot. And Scorpio, one of my favorite examples is that, an Aries has got a problem with you. It just grabs the knife and then stab you right in your chest from the front. Scorpio would be probably stabbing you in the back, and probably it would be actually stabbing you. It would be putting a little bit of a poison in your drink, so that the death is going to be something like you're going to suffer, really. So Scorpio has got a tendency to hurt even more than Aries, because it wants you to kind of die slowly. So, but each expression is very Marsian anyway. Now, when we are looking at Mars retrograde periods, one thing you should remember is that typically the retrograde period always starts when Mars and the Sun are already in the opposition phase. So typically there is kind of like an inconjunction going on between them when the opposition starts, and then so it happens between the opposition phase, basically. I'm going to demonstrate that for you very shortly. So Mars will be entering the sign of Gemini on the 20th of August, and then it will leave the sign of Gemini only on the 25th or 26th of March, 2023, when it's going to be moving into the sign of Cancer. Now, what Mars will do is actually it will travel between 8 to 25 degrees. So another thing which I would like you to look at in your own chart, do you have any planet on, especially on 8 degree or 25 degree of Gemini? The reason being is because whenever a planet is actually stationary, they tend to be a lot more powerful. So meaning that Mars is going to go stationary, for instance, on 8 degree, it means that it's going to spend an extra amount of time on that 8 degree. I would be very strict with the orbs. So I would only consider planets if you have got it on 8 or 9 degree. or 24 or 25 degree. Other than that, of course, Mars going to be traveling between those 2 degrees for about 7.5 months. And also one other interesting thing is, so I'm going to give you today quite few dates to look at what Mars kind of wants to do with you. One of the data I would like you to give is 2020 between May till about July. I would like you to think about what was going on in your life around that time. The reason being is because Venus was retrograde during that period of time, also around the same degrees. Obviously, the Venus retrograde period is a little bit shorter than the Mars, and that's due to the how close it is to the Sun and so forth. But Mars was going retrograde there. Mercury was also retrograde here in 2021, in the middle of the year. So 2020 middle of the year, 2021 middle of the year could be actually interesting for everyone, because we had already a few planetary energies going retrograde around that time. And the third factor is that North Node went through these points also in 2021. So when we are looking at the key manifestations of Mars, Mars is something to do with cutting away. So for instance, 2020, sometimes in, as I said, between May and July, I had Venus retrograde going on in my 4th house. So what happened is that this is the time when actually I bought a property. Okay, I bought a property there in Hungary. And then now we are actually, that was the Venus retrograde period. Then we had 2021, middle of the year, when Mercury actually went retrograde there. Well, this is the time when I decided that I'm going to be moving. And then I moved to a different country. Okay, so I moved in March 2021, and then I went to Bulgaria. And then in the summer, I decided that I wanted to go to Cyprus, and then eventually I went to Turkey. So I kind of like really started a moving period there. So Mars is gonna, obviously the Mars retrograde period is gonna be happening in my 4th house. So it might bring up some topics in regards to relocation. And this is going to be true for Pisces rising sign. We're gonna be looking at these. I'm just giving a little bit of a heads up so that you know what to check for. And of course, North Node went through also those points, which is all about a karmic journey. So maybe for me, it was somehow a karmic kind of learning to buy properties or to actually move to these places or whatever it is. And maybe Mars wants to cut them away. So that's why I decided to actually sell those properties I bought, because, anyway, doesn't matter. Okay, so you can look at it this way. This is going to be one of the some of the key dates I would like you to look at, and I'm going to be giving you another key dates. So Mars retrograde in the sign of Gemini. So I've collected a few keywords for you in regards to Gemini. So it represents your way of thinking. So when Mars, which is kind of like a speedy planet, it's about speed, it's about fiery energy. So your way of thinking can be on steroids, really. So you can have plenty of ideas, but it's also very easy to forget about those ideas because your brain is going to be on fire. Your brain is going to be thinking 24/7. So you should have a pen around you all the time, which is actually Gemini. Gemini really talks about choices. So, and Mars, which tends to be cutting things away, it might be, you made some choices in 2020 or 2021 in regards to the house position, wherever it's going to go retrograde. And maybe Mars wants to actually, wants you to finish those because you haven't finished them yet, or it wants to cut them away because it's not serving your needs. Gemini talks about your ideas. It talks about how you feel mentally. And Mars is the planet of depression, in my opinion. So this could be quite a depressive time for some people, surely. Gemini also represents short distance travels. So when Mars goes in there, unfortunately, and Gemini is something like the gymnasiums or the road. So Mars can cause road accidents or accidents in gymnasiums, for instance. We're gonna just have to be careful a little bit about it. Gemini represents neighbors or neighborhoods. So some part of the world, probably some neighborhood gonna go nuts. Maybe there is gonna be theft going on, like shopliftings and so forth. And maybe there is gonna be, I don't know, Gemini as in shops, Mars as in guns, people are gonna go in and then trying to rob a shop, for instance. And maybe because of the food prices and so forth. Also, Mars has got the tendency to electrify everything. So Gemini is actually about trading. So the trading could be quite kind of volatile, let's put it that way, in the next 7-8 months. But also, Gemini rules over school system. Typically, we tend to be associating this with primary schools, but overall, I would just say this is something to do with studying. So it's going to be interesting to see what Mars actually brings into the education system. But it could show that, for instance, school kids are going to go somehow, unfortunately, like shooting in schools, for instance. So the school kids are going to be protesting or things like that is actually very possible while Mars is in the sign of Gemini. Gemini is about gathering information, and Mars tends to be prying up the information. So people tend to forget that Mars does have but two sides. One is kind of like the one who just, runs out to the street and then starts fighting. But the other side of Mars is the thinker. Because without any type of strategy, Mars needs to realize that I'm never going to win. I'm never going to win a battle if I don't come up with a strategy. And that takes a little bit of a time for Mars. So Mars in the sign of Gemini is extremely good for gathering information before actually we make any type of decisions or choices about something. And I think this is one of the biggest learning of this Mars in Gemini. Before we kind of take action about something, and that's a little bit of a danger because Gemini is a mutable sign. So it changes its mind quite often, and Mars goes along with it. And the reason why we have got a retrograde period is because we're going to have to slow our mind down a little bit. We're going to have to take those, we're going to have to put the whip down a little bit before actually we get going about something. Gemini also rules over responses. So having arguments with others is, let's say, with your siblings or with your neighbors, is actually possible. Or we just give a harsh response to someone, for instance, at the butcher, and then we didn't mean it, but we kind of feel agitated. So our communication style can be kind of on edges. And it's just something to be mindful about. Or maybe some of those who are writers or maybe who are teaching, they might have got a lot more energy to kind of go through their material or to write because they want to finish up quickly something. In that case, that retrograde period is that you're going to have to watch out for grammar mistakes or styling and so forth, or whether I'm writing about facts or I'm writing about my own emotions, how we can actually mix the two things together. Also, Gemini rules over opinions. I mean, Gemini at the Sagittarius axis is something to do with opinions. So with Mars, which is a forceful energy, it's very possible to try to force our opinion on something. And typically when Mars is retrograde, it kind of tends to be dividing the population into two. Okay, and that's typical with Gemini as well, because Gemini is a double-bodied sign. So it kind of indicates one side of the population and then the other side of the local community also. And then imagine that Mars is kind of just cutting through. So it's very possible that two kind of groups of people are not going to be able to exchange their opinions because they are going to be on a different viewpoint. But also, Gemini is very curious. So we can be very excited, for instance, about a topic. We can be very eager, if you like it, to learn new skills. And Gemini does talk about skills. Now, typically, Gemini would be the skills in regards to anything to do with our hands, and Mars rules over engineering. So maybe I just decided to do a little bit of a DIY around my home environment. One thing which Gemini does need to be careful about is that it has got a tendency to be a little bit superficial or not thinking things through. I'm not meant to be saying something out loud because my best friend told me not to. And then Mars can actually stir things up there. And then we might find ourselves in a gossipy situation. And we come across as two-faced to others. Or another thing which can be a little bit of a danger of Gemini, because it's kind of like a floating energy that we start missing details. We overlook things. And that's also very possible with Mars here, becoming a little bit more scattered about something. But on a positive note, it definitely could be a period of time when you can actually make more connections with others. Now, Gemini is all about understanding reality. Gemini is a dual sign, as I said. And what it does is that it integrates the Aries and the Taurus energy, because the first sign is Aries, then the next one is Taurus, and then it integrates the two signs. Now I'm talking about the psychological development of the signs. So one of the things Gemini is here to do is to stand up for the self, which actually comes from the Aries energy, and also somehow to protect the assets they have actually accumulated. Now, obviously, we do know, everyone knows that Gemini is all about communication. Now, communication can only happen when there are two people involved, or minimum two people involved. So Gemini is the very first humanitarian sign, which represents humanitarian energies. But from a kind of like an esoteric point of view, Gemini is about connecting the heaven and the earth. Right? If you think about, again, that Aries and Taurus energy, Taurus would represent the earth. And even though Aries nothing has got to do with heaven, but you are born in a mystical way. So Gemini represents that connection. Now, the story behind it is that Mercury was the only god who was able to travel between heaven and earth. Okay, he had even the ability to bring the dead back into life if he wanted to. So therefore, Gemini is the connection between heaven and earth. And also Mercury was the planet who actually delivered messages between the gods and the human beings. So, and then he was extremely speedy. He was able to travel between two dimensions as much as he wanted to. Now, the fact that Gemini is a dual sign, it really talks about that all the facts what we have got at hand has got actually two sides. Now, obviously, the polarity of Gemini is Sagittarius, which talks about the absolute truth. You know, I kind of feel like that Mars in the sign of Gemini is going to bring us some type of situations where we kind of believe this is the truth, and then we're going to realize that there was absolutely a big scam or a lie. So somehow Mars in the sign of Gemini being retrograde does talk about that what you see in front of you is not always the absolute truth. And you're going to have to dig into the facts and the data a little bit more. You're going to have to kind of somehow connect the dots. And that would be the Sagittarius part, which has got the ability to connect the dots. Gemini is something to do with the doorway between two worlds. So it does talk about the parallel and the linear worlds, what we have. So again, it talks about the fact that on one hand, surely that, everything has got two sides, at least. So you don't need to represent one side all the time. You have to be actually communicating to others to understand their motives as well. So this Mars retrograde period, on one hand, I kind of believe that the population is going to get again divided somehow, just like it happened in 2020. And then people were arguing about, oh, we need vaccine, we don't need vaccine, we should stay at home, we should not stay at home. Maybe this time around, I don't know, we should sit in a car or we should not sit in a car. God knows what the kind of like this concept is going to be, but somehow people's opinion is going to be divided. And I think we're gonna see plenty of arguments overall. Now, also Gemini is about the trickster of the zodiacal signs. Now, the story behind it is that Hermes, as I said, was the only one who was able to travel between two worlds. And one day he decided that he wanted to save someone who died. So he had to be tricking Pluto, making a trick on Pluto to be able to bring that person back. That's one of the story behind Hermes. The other one is that when he was a young child, as soon as he was born, actually his brother was Apollo, and then he made the cows to walk backwards. And everyone was like, what is going on here? So he had the ability to do these little tricks, but he never really wants to hurt anyone. He just wants to have a little bit of a fun. So sometimes actually the Gemini energy does talk about a little bit being childlike. And Mars is not the most mature energy either. So one of the other message of Mars being in the sign of Gemini is that, do we have the tendency to be childlike about something? Do we need to do some maturation somehow? Okay. And another interesting thing which I would like to mention about Gemini, because this is the eighth sign from Scorpio. So this is the kind of like the eighth house from the eighth. So I tend to look at Gemini as the next incarnation in life. So if you have got planets there, it's kind of like we can do good or we can do bad about those planetary energies. And I think this could be a karmic signature of what is going to be coming up in our next life, or maybe in the next, 10 years or 20 years. But it somehow, for Gemini, for me, is a karmic signature. And that is also supported by the fact that it is the doorway between two worlds. It is connecting the heaven and the earth together. It is the only energy which is able to travel between the underworld as well as the heaven, right? So somehow Gemini does represent rebirth for me as well. The ruler, which is Mercury, is the god of doorways and crossroads. So that's the reason why Gemini represents choices. So I think Mars is going to force us to make certain type of choices in our life, depending on the house position where it is actually falling into. Maybe the second house, and we're going to have to make choices about what we are going to be spending on our money on. Maybe it's the fourth house, whether I want to move back to somewhere or I want to move away or whatever it is. And are we actually reconsidering our choices well enough or not? Now, also, a little bit another history here, because Gemini does represent the twins. And one of the famous twin history is about Romulus and Remus, who were, both of them were abandoned by their parents, and then they were raised by an animal and so forth. And then they went back to Rome, and then they claimed their kind of like their birthright. to be, kings and so forth. So it does, on one hand, it does talk about fighting for the birthright when it comes to Gemini. Typically, it happens with some type of sibling rivalry. And you should know that Romulus and Remus was the son, both of them were the son of Mars as well. So it could talk about wanting to fight for something which I kind of feel like it's mine, but because I'm not getting it, I'm going to be rebellious about it, or I'm going to go on a riot, or I'm going to, fight for what's mine, what's being taken away. Maybe it's going to be about insurance policy of the cars. Maybe it's going to be about, transportation or whatever it is. And then you kind of feel like that I'm not getting what kind of I signed up for. So Gemini is, as I mentioned, it's a dual sign. So it really does talk about the split between the emotions and the mind. It has got the tendency to change its mood as well quite often. Sometimes it kind of talks about light and dark moods. Sometimes it's extremely introverted and sometimes it's very extroverted. But it also brings together the masculine and the feminine sign. Now, Gemini tends to be a neutral gender, but in traditional ways, actually, it was a girl and a boy, kind of like being a twin. But it got changed somewhere I think, in the Renaissance era, where they kind of started neutralizing them, and the gender wasn't actually important. So some of the questions which actually it brings up by Mars being here, or some of the major question of Gemini is that which side of yours are you trying to repress? Is that the masculine or the feminine side, the introvert or the extrovert side? Because Mars is going to force you somehow to bring a balance in between those two, or it's going to completely just go off, on the scale, and it's just going to tear the scale if you like it. Or which side are you trying to project onto others? The feminine or the masculine side. So there is an element of a little bit of a blackmailing going on with Mars in the sign of Gemini. Gemini represents breathing, so something to do with the lungs also. So are you actually breathing, or are you actually trying to grasp that breath? Because when you breathe in and breathe out, typically we tend to be saying that it's yoga, right? So Mars might make it popular there in the sign of Gemini to do yoga. But when we breathe, we actually calm down. So there is no point in being nervous. So actually it does ask about Mars in Gemini, what are you tend to be nervous about? What triggers your nerve system, or is anyone getting on your nerves? These could be some of the questions which come up here. Gemini is actually, as I have mentioned a few times already, it's a mutable energy. So it's always on the go. So we need to understand that nothing is static. Everything is on the move and changes. So somehow Mars is going to understand or force us to understand that, holding on to something is not always a good idea. We're going to have to let go of something because things are changing. And if we don't change, it's going to be a lot more painful. And of course, Gemini is about the yin and the yang energies all together. So how to kind of create a marriage between our masculine and the feminine side, which obviously we're talking about Mars, which is a masculine planet. Gemini is typically a masculine sign. However, that's the neutral, kind of like this non-binary type of energy, what is kind of like a favorite word nowadays. When people don't associate themselves with being a man or a woman, they kind of believe that they belong to both. And therefore, it's very possible that there is going to be a little bit of an attack against those type of people also. Or things are, going to be on social media, gossips and rumors and so forth. Those are all Gemini related. So I did collect a few things what I've already talked about, some of the possible manifestation on a personal level, but it's very easy to make quick choices, which we are going to be regretting. So you might want to be careful about that. Or you might want to be doing plenty of things at the same time, kind of like juggling a little bit. And there is a very, very easy chance to make a mistake about something. Or we want to be actually burning the candle from both ends, and it never really plays out well. It's very easy to get burned. So, maybe I've got two girlfriends and boyfriends going on at the same time, or I've got 10 projects to go after. And there is no somehow, um, there is no, prioritization going on at the same time. So there is a need to, have all the data and then prioritize those. And that's going to be very important here. Or also Gemini, which represents the two sides of the brain. One is more analytical, the other one is more emotional. So Mars can trigger the emotional side here, or we completely tend to be, because remember, Mercury is going to be in the sign of Scorpio. That's why I'm picking on the emotional things. We kind of want to be going back into our shell, or we're going to be completely irrational when we look at certain type of things in life. Or it might be actually talking about that we're going to have to cut out all the negative way of thinking what we have. It might want us to learn new skills. It wants us to focus on some type of projects. It may be the desire to travel to the village, or to see the parents, or basically short distance vacations. So therefore, unfortunately, I kind of believe that there is a possibility that we're gonna have another lockdown. I did mention that in my full moon video, and unfortunately I kind of see that as a possibility also, with Mars being in the sign of Gemini. Now, if someone has got a second to look up, because I forgot to do that, but as far as I remember, Mars was connecting to the North Node sometimes in 2000 and hold on, 2020, sometimes between March and sometimes in June, I guess. Somewhere around that time, I think Mars was there when they met with North Node. And it kind of started, especially in Europe, the lockdown started around March, especially April onwards. I think Mars met North Node. I think the most active period was between 1st of April till 17th of April. I kind of on top of my head, but if someone has got a second to look that up, I forgot to look that up. Sorry about that. And then just type it into the chat box. But anyway, what I was going to say is that unfortunately, I see the possibility of another lockdown to come up. We need to pay attention to what we say to others, because it's very easy to say something out loud that's going to hurt other people. Sometimes Mars in Gemini does not necessarily care about other people's feelings at all, because none of them are really connected on a feeling level. Or we're gonna try different types of methods, or it's very easy to make up lies and stories and scams when there is Mars in the sign of Gemini. So I really want everyone to be mindful about, this emails of scam, and I don't know, having 10 types of AstroViktor on Facebook and Instagram and all those type of things, because Mars might trigger that. And do not spend your money unless, you kind of confirm that the person is right. That's a possibility also here. And also, Gemini, which has got the tendency to focus on something, Mars might be actually cutting that focal ability away, or you're going to be extremely focused on something which is right in front of you, and then you're not going to see the bigger picture. And Gemini cannot really function well without the Sagittarius side, which is the bigger picture. Okay, so therefore, just you see what is right in front of you. Now, when we are looking at some of the from a dignity point of view, Mars, by the way, does not have so much strength in the sign of Gemini. It has got strength by phase in the second decan, which is from the 11th degree to the 20th degree. But this is most part of Gemini Mars is actually peregrine. So peregrine means that it's kind of like a fool who is traveling around, not caring about what is going on. Is just being the host of others, and then when it feels like it kind of moves on. So it's kind of like a traveler type of energy. Typically, from a traditional point of view, we tend to be looking at the peregrine planet as debilitation rather than kind of like just neutral energy. Yes, I did look it up for you. It was between March 17 till 7th of April when Mars and North Node had a conjunction. Yes. So, but it was in 2021. Sorry about that, not 2020. So it's worth looking at what was going on around that time, because we were meant to be learning about Mars during that period of time. And Mars is going to go retrograde. So did we learn the right things, or do we actually have to revisit that knowledge we gained approximately 1.5 years ago? And that's going to be also another date to look at. I'm going to give you other dates also, which will be also important. Now, Mars, from a technical point of view, Mars cycle is about 687 days. Its retrograde period tends to be between 65 to 80 days. It's not like Venus, who is having this beautiful rose shape while it's moving around, or it doesn't have that significant movement. The upcoming retrograde period is going to actually last for 74 days, but sometimes actually it can even last up to 82 days. So it's a little bit of a longer period. Now, some of the other questions, because one thing which we should remember, when you are looking at what's very interesting about Mars retrograde period, as I said, it always happens in the opposition phase. So the opposition is an 180 degree period. 180 degree aspect. And so when Mars is actually approximately about 135, 150 degree away from the sun, it kind of starts slowing down. It's kind of not necessarily, it's not a speedy energy. By the way, Mars tends to be going about 0.41 minute a day. So it's a lot slower. And then it reaches the opposition position. And that's kind of like when the retrograde period really starts. And then it goes backwards. Okay? So this is how we should be looking at that. Now, so from a retrograde point of view, we're always going to have to look at also where the sun is, because they have got this cycle going on, right? They are making a conjunction at certain amount of times. So from a sun position point of view, are the things you are taking action about aligned with your true purpose? And this is going to be a big question for everyone in the upcoming period of time. Are they taking you in the right direction? Are you on the right path? Have you really discovered your passion yet? Or if not, do you have to learn a new skill to be on the right road? Are you asserting your right to be who you are? Are you fighting for your rights? Are you allowing others to ride uh, over your destiny? Is your anger at what could have been keeping you from what you could become if you were not angry? And therefore, you might be a little bit blindsided. Or do you have got the courage to create something? This is going to be these questions are going to be important during this retrograde period, or with any type of Mars retrograde anyway. So what is Mars in mundane astrology? Mars is about sport, being aggressive. It talks about violence in the world. It does talk about leaders, especially military leaders, but it could talk about any type of leaders anyway. It talks about surgeons to a certain extent, kind of like these ER emergency situations. It talks about criminality, crimes, engineering, war, or just area of in your life which might be under loads of stress. So what does it tell us when it is in the sign of Gemini? I mean, Gemini is intellectual, so actually it could show that some intellectual type of sport is going to be a lot more important in the next 8 months. Maybe playing the chess at home or whatever it is. But also, Gemini, as I said, is about shopping. So I think people might start aggressively shopping because they want to be having assets rather than having their money, for instance, in the bank. Or I did look up actually when there were riots going on in England, and I found it very interesting that Mars played, of course, a significant role there. And Mars and the North Node and the South Node were actually in squares. And I find it very interesting that Mars is going through the degrees of the North Node a couple of years back, or 1 year back, and I just find it very interesting. So it's very possible that there's going to be some type of riots, especially because of the prices, what is going on. It could also talk about, of course, that the crimes are going to be growing a lot more. Kind of like your car is going to get stolen, or it's going to get pried up, or things like that. Now, Mars, from a symbolic point of view, it's kind of like the alchemy symbol of iron. Also, Mars as the symbol is the universal sign of the male gender. We can see a circle and then we can see an arrow there. Now, the circle would represent the person to become a whole. It's kind of like the representation of your ego, if you like it. And the arrow, which is pointing upwards, is kind of like showing that I've got a desire to somehow climb the hierarchy ladder. So hopefully that kind of explains why Mars has got exaltation in the sign of Capricorn, because Capricorn does want to kind of achieve those qualities. Also, Mars is kind of like a phallic symbol as well. So it does talk about sexuality. And you might actually see that while Mars is in the sign of Gemini, that we're gonna receive all these ads through sexual, stuff. And so do not click on those type of things, because it's very easy that they are scam and so forth. Or we might be hearing a lot more about, I don't know, that this tablet is gonna improve your sexual performance, or stuff like that. Because Gemini can actually represent some technological gadgets also. Or we can do this penis enlargement and stuff like that. So that's very possible that we're going to read a lot more news about those. It's very possible that we're going to be reading a lot more about a lot more sexual scandal as well, which I wouldn't be shocked about either. Mars is the very first planet which has got an individual directed power. Why is that? Because Mars is the very first planet who leaves the sun behind and has got the ability to form an opposition with the sun. So if you think about Venus and Mercury, which are always very close by to the sun, Mercury never goes more than 29 degrees, Venus never goes more than 49 degrees from the king's kind of lair, if you like it. They are always sleeping right next to the king. Mars becomes therefore that rebellious energy who says, you know what, I'm going to tell you that you are a crappy person. I don't care what your actions are going to be. So Mars has got the rebellious nature. Some of the positive keywords of Mars. It does talk about being passionate about something. So you might become a lot more passionate about reading or connecting with schoolmates, or for instance, as I said, Gemini rules over gymnasium. So actually it's very possible that you want to be doing jogging in the morning, or typically because Gemini represents team sport. So it's very possible that you want to play football, or you want to go back to, I don't know, basketball playing or whatever it is. Something also which you can more likely do with your hands rather than with your legs. So the basketball would be a great example of Gemini. Also, it's about being courageous about studying something, for instance, I've always maybe dreamed about, but I've never done it before. One of the reasons why I said that probably people might go crazy when it comes to shopping, and they might be buying up all the oil and stuff like that, is because Gemini loves actually shopping, and Mars is survival instincts. So I want to be having as much goods as possible at home, because what if the prices of the product is going to be increased, for instance? So for me, price increase does come this time around with this Mars in the sign of Gemini. Mars is about taking risks, but also having the power. So grabbing the power back into my hand, not being scared about something. It's about being pioneering when it comes to saying out loud, sharing your opinions, or sharing the truth with others. Mars, on a higher level, it definitely fight for a cause. And when it's in the sign of Gemini, maybe it's going to be writing an article about that truth. Some of the negative interpretation of Mars is anger, impatience, violence, aggression, being hasty, or lack of drive. It's very, Mars retrograde definitely wants you to look at your drive. It definitely wants you to look at what you have accomplished so far. And maybe when you look back, you kind of feel like that it was a lot easier for me 5 years ago, and it's not that easy now. So it can lead to kind of like a little bit of a depletion, and the energy level somehow drops here. So Mars in the sign of Gemini wants you to be always on the go, connect with people, especially with people who can actually pioneer you. Because Mars is not always able to pioneer. Sometimes you need to be pioneered by others. And who are those people who are positively affecting you? Or Mars, as in the knife, do you need to cut some people out of your life who are actually, taking some energy away from you because they might be too pessimistic? Remember that Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio in the aggression chart. So pessimistic approach, way of like communication is actually possible with this type of energy. One other interesting story which I wanted to share about Mars. Mars had a brother called Hephaestus. Both of them were the sons of Zeus and Hera, and they always had sibling rivalry going on. Now, the story behind Hephaestus is that he was born premature, he was crippled, his feet were kind of turned inwards. And the mom didn't necessarily like that, just so she wanted to get rid of her own son. And what she did was she threw him into the sea. Now, there was this woman who rescued him and raised him as her own son. Now, obviously, Hephaestus, which is a little bit kind of like the ruler of Scorpio, if you like it, always wanted to take revenge on her own mother. Because, why on earth did you throw me away? Because I had those feet turned inwards, and so forth. So it was very much about holding on to grudges. And he became a blacksmith, and then he was creating these beautiful ornaments. For instance, he created the shield for Pallas Athene, or an armor for Hermes. And one day, the mom realized how talented her son is. So she asked him to make a golden throne for her. And then Hephaestus said, okay, you know what, I'm going to do that. And basically, she didn't realize that she was about to sit into a throne with invisible chains, which no one would have been able to kind of break off, not even his own father. Because what Hephaestus was very good at was giving shapes and forms to certain people's talents, right? So if you think about Pallas Athene, which was a warrior princess, she just needed a shield to be able to protect herself, and so forth. So Hephaestus had the ability to look at others, see their talent, and then give a physical form of that talent. And if you start thinking about it, we're talking about Mars because this is the shadow side of Mars, the Hephaestus story. The sun has got exaltation in the sign of Aries. So it does talk about that special talent which needs to be given shape and form for. So anyways, so he made this beautiful golden throne to his own mother. She got trapped, and then they had to negotiate to set her free. And Hephaestus wanted the most beautiful woman in Earth. That's how Venus became his wife. So which is kind of talking about a little bit of a greed there. But obviously, we do know that Venus and Mars became lovers. And Venus and Hephaestus never had children together. They never had children together, but Venus and Mars had 4 of them, actually. Because Venus never wanted to be the wife of Hephaestus. So this is kind of like the scorpionic side of Mars. And some of the lessons which actually talks about is that we want to take revenge. We never forget things. We react badly to rejections, but at the same time, we're craving for acceptance also. Or we start bargaining. So imagine that Mars in the sign of Gemini is that you go to the market and you're trying to bargain for things. That's what kind of like it can represent. Or there is a strong desire for love and to be loved by someone with that Mars energy. It just shows it in a completely different way. Now, what's also interesting is that Chiron exactly had the same story. And Chiron is in the sign of Aries at the moment on around 16 degrees. But Chiron was rejected by his own father. And instead of revenge, he became a mentor and he overcame the rejection of his own father and he showed the path to others how to overcome that. The reason why I wanted to mention that is because Mars will be actually sextiling Chiron in the next 7.5, 8 months. So on one hand, the biggest lesson is that how to leave that revengeful side of yours behind, how to make peace with the past so that you can move forward. What area of life did you get rejected? And knowing that, rejection sometimes happens because there is something better out there which are awaiting for us. And we're just going to have to grab the opportunity. And do not forget that while Mars is in the sign of Aries, in the sign of Gemini, Jupiter will be also in the sign of Aries. Most of the time, right? Because it's going to go back sometimes at the end of the year, though. So at least a 3-month period. So we do have got loads of emphasis on overcoming somehow the past and then rebuilding something new, though. It's going to be interesting to see all the charts. I brought you 4 charts for today, the ingression chart, the stationary chart, and so forth, to explore those a little bit. So Mars cycle kind of like lasts for about 2 years and actually about maximum 2 years and 2 months. So from an importance point of view, probably I would differentiate 6 phases. However, just like the moon, each planet has got 8 phases, but I would be emphasizing 6 phases. Conjunction, the first square, the retrograde station, then we've got the opposition, then we've got a direct station, and then last but not least, we've got a last square. This is going to be very important because I'm going to break this down for you so that you can have a better understanding of what you should expect from this Mars cycle. Because it's not enough to look at that, okay, it's going retrograde in the sign of Gemini. We're going to have to look at where it all started. And that's going to be the conjunction period. So that's why I emphasize that the position of Mars in relation to the sun is actually extremely crucial. So I'm going to come back onto that. So I collected, I found online the past conjunctions between the sun and not the past conjunctions. This is the retrograde periods. Okay. Sorry, these are retrograde periods. Past, retrograde. Sorry about that. So the last retrograde period. So you can see that it's going retrograde on the October 30th on 25 degree, and then it's going to go direct on 8 degree on January 12 or 13, 2023. Okay, now one of the reasons why I wanted to collect all these because I wanted to see whether there is some coloration going on, where, maybe Mars is making a pattern or not, but I didn't necessarily find any type of patterns whatsoever, even though I looked at approximately about 150 years of retrograde periods. Here I only put down the last kind of like 20 years. But I didn't see any type of patterns. So there is nothing special about that. Now, the last conjunction, the last conjunction between Mars and the Sun in the sign of Gemini happened in 2015 on 23 degree. Now, I also found it very interesting that Mars is going to go retrograde almost on the same degree where the previous conjunction happened. So that's another date which I would like you to think about what was going on in your life, sometimes in 2015, around that June period. Okay. Just because this might actually make a repetition within that period. And also we had a new moon happening a couple of days after on 25 degree of Gemini, and that's exactly where Mars is going to go retrograde. So I kind of feel like that this 2015 period might be something to look at. Now, as I mentioned, Mars always goes retrograde in that opposition phase. Okay, so therefore the cycle always starts with a conjunction. So I tried to kind of look at that the last cycle actually started on I mean, it happened in the sign of Libra. So you're going to kind of see that here, which was taking place in 2021, sorry. And that happened on 15 degree. But what I did for you here is that I kind of collected the last cycles in the sign of Libra. We had one in 1974 on 20 degree. We had in 1989 September, it was happening on 6 degree. Then we had one in 2006, October 23rd and 29 degree, and 2021, October 8, 15 degree. Now, what I've noticed is that there is always a 14, 15 degree difference going on between the cycles. So what you see here is that it happened on 20 degree, and then it goes back to 14 degree. So it goes 9 degree ahead every 2 cycle. Then we had it on 29 degree, and then it went back into 15 degree of Libra. There is always kind of like a 14 degree difference. I did look this up with other signs as well. I didn't put down the dates, but this 14, 15 degree, between 13 to 15 degree is always there. So that's the only repetition I kind of found with the Mars retrograde energies. Unfortunately, I didn't have more time to dive into this, what it would actually indicate. So I need to do a lot more research on that, but this 14 degree was very, very interesting to me. But as you can see, the last conjunction took place 2021, October 8, which was happening on 15 degree of Libra. Now, why that is important for us? I mean, I wanted to look at this previous cycle because that's another important date what you want to be focusing on. What was going on in our lives, 2021 October? Because that's the conjunction. Now we are getting to the opposition period, which is going to be the peak period of that conjunction. Okay, so you might want to go back and then look at it, but I put up the chart for you here. So you can see that it happened on 15 degree. Forget about the house positions, by the way, because obviously it depends on your own location where you are. But it happens on an Aries dot. So it's quite a feisty. So the fact that it's Libra, which is about collaboration and relationship matters. So this could indicate that relationships are going to go rocky, for instance, or collaborations or contracts are going to be going rocky. This conjunction actually was opposing Chiron, which can actually indicate that Chiron, which is something to do with the past mistakes or wounds, they are to be somehow resolved, but in a conflictual way. Why is that? Because it's an Aries dot plus opposition as well. So we're going to have quite loads of conflicts going on, which needs to be resolved in one way or another. But also, it happens on the relationship axis, which really talks about that, you know what, there is loads of wounds going on out there when it comes to certain relationships. How are we going to fix that? We can also see that this Sun and Mars conjunction happened alongside with Mercury, which was actually retrograde around that period of time. So that could show that there are plenty of miscommunication going on in the previous in this cycle. And how are we going to repair this relationship overall? How are we going to repair certain type of relationships, which are actually old problems with that Chiron, which originates from a miscommunication at one point, okay? So that needs to be actually, solved. It could talk about that I don't feel worthy enough, or we're going to have to put our pride a little bit aside, and we're going to have to learn to ask for help, because that's the Libra energy, right? That we collaborate with others. So Mercury, by the way, here is on Taurus dwarfs, which could which can actually indicate that we talk about money, lands, territories. Or I want to be reasoning about truth. I'm trying to be negotiating about something. And this energy is what we call as via combusta, which is actually starting on 15 degree of Libra. Via combusta is when we kind of burnt. It typically indicates that shit is about to happen, basically. We call it as a burnt road. It's between 15 degree of Libra to 15 degree of Scorpio. It tends to be, in traditional astrology, we tend to be just thinking that the moon is via combusta between those 2 degrees. But overall, any planet being there could be a challenge, apart from Mars and Saturn, because those are secretly Mars and Saturnian territories. So, I put a video link up for you because I did make a video about this Mars, Sun, and Mercury conjunction back in 2021 October. And one of the things which I mentioned that most probably there is going to be a war happening. Because when I looked at this chart, this was very, very war-like to me. Yeah, so if you're curious about that, I did mention, I didn't know it was going to be Russia and Ukraine, to be frank. But you know what, I'm thinking back, I should have known. Why? Because I'm going to go back, and the last conjunction, which I mentioned here for you, in the sign of Gemini, was 2015 June. Ukraine and Russia were also having a war in 2015. Okay. I should have known, but anyway, I didn't necessarily look it up. So what we see here with this, though, and I'm not going to be, I think I'm going to be quite positive with this Mars retrogrades, actually, because I'm seeing some great stuff. What it's going to do is that it's going to actually trine Saturn for 7 months. It's going to trine the Libra point, this 15 degree, what I was talking about, for 7 months. It's going to sextile Chiron. So it's an opportunity to start a healing when it comes to relationships and communications. Libra is about peace. So hopefully it's going to bring us some opportunity to heal and to create peace, finally. However, Chiron is bang on opposing that conjunction point of Libra. So going back to that chart, can you see it's on 15 degree? Chiron is on 16 degree, but it's retrograde now. So it's going to come back and oppose that point. Oh, sorry, that's not the one. So it does talk about, on one hand, that we'd have to make sacrifices, or these negotiations are not going to come easily. There is going to be demands going on, and unfortunately, it's going to be a challenge. The Mars is going to be squaring Neptune. So it does talk about things like making difference between reality and dreams, or going too far with certain type of things, or we want to be making our mind up about something which is truth or a fact, and then we don't really know what to do. Or the fact that Mars is in the sign of Gemini, which is very much about connections, right? It's very hard to make connections when Mars and Neptune are squaring because we don't understand other people's motives. Mars actually is in conjuncting Pluto when it goes retrograde. So Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn for a very long time. So Pluto is somewhere around 27 degree of Capricorn at the moment, right? Somewhere sitting there. So it's going to be, and then as you can see, Pluto was on 24 degree on the conjunction chart. So it's bang on in conjuncting those 2 points. And Pluto has been trying to break down the walls for a while when it comes to political matters, when it comes to the banking system. Pluto has been trying to expose the wealthy people, right? It wants us to change our perspective and way of thinking over certain type of things. And Mars is going to be in conjunction. So I'm quite optimistic about this Mars retrograde because it does, even if we have a lockdown, I think it will be the last one, or it will be a short amount of time, or people are going to stand up for themselves and they're going to kind of listen to us. But I very much hope that this also brings great negotiations with certain type of countries. And we're going to agree on how to trade, how to do the transportation or food or whatever it is. But some very great kind of peacemaking process is going to start during this retrograde Mars. It might not finish by that time, though. I would like to point it out. When I did the Ukraine war video, I did say that either the war is going to last for 18 weeks or 18 months. So the 18-month would be sometimes in 2000. Well, it's not going to be 18 weeks because that's gone already. So 18-month would be sometimes 2023 summer. So I kind of feel like that negotiations are going to start, especially after December, maybe November, at the end of November, December. And then after, it's going to take time, but it's finally going to happen something. But this Mars is not looking too bad overall. However, Mars is going to be out of bound almost the whole retrogression period. This is not something which happens that rarely, though, because Mars is out of bounds 10 to 15% of the time. Remember that Mars is the first planet which leaves the sun way behind and it's being able to oppose the sun. So it's a rebellious energy. So it's not super rare. But when it's retrograde at the same time, that's quite an indication. So when Mars is out of bound, it's kind of like the crime numbers can be, rocketing, basically. It's kind of like an out of bound Mars is kind of like the terror attacks. So can we expect those type of things? Unfortunately, we can. What I'm, though, very afraid of that this Mars retrograde happens in the US 7th house. US also has got Mars natally in the sign of Gemini. And also Mars was in the sign of Gemini when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So I'm really hoping that, it doesn't indicate any worry situations or any kind of, but I'm expecting that US will have debates with some countries because the eclipse also happening in November, it's very Marsian. So Sun, Mercury, Venus will be all ruled by Mars, which is out of bound. Yeah, so again, somehow US for me is on the horizon. I think the US dollar is not going to be as strong during that period of time. That's what I kind of feel like. But I'm looking at the ingress chart here. So it happens on the 20th of August, 2022. And you can see that Mars is on 0 degree of Gemini. Now, what straight away was very striking to me, that the moon is also in the sign of Gemini. So when you are working with ingress chart, basically this is something which a little bit forgotten in mundane astrology, I think, but it's very important. So you should use this as a transit chart. So when Mars triggers moon, which is by transits, what is moon? The people, or real estate industry, or home environments, or families, or whatever it is. Mars is shortly after, sometimes in around 7th of September, it will trigger the moon position straight away. So you might not see anything around 20th of August when Mars moves there, but we should see something around 7th of September And I kind of feel like that moon as in people or as in important events, also what moon represents, there will be some very important events happening around that time. Maybe demonstrations, maybe just people will feel very agitated or whatever it is, but there is going to be something happening around the 7th of September. Also, what you see in this chart is that as soon as Mars steps into the sign of Gemini, it's bang on squaring Vesta, which is also on 0 degree. Vesta will be here for a while, but it turned retrograde and then it's ready to go back into the sign of Aquarius. So, and Vesta is about devotion. It's kind of like a cosmic spiritual mission, what Vesta is about in the sign of Pisces. And those two are going to be squaring each other. So it's very much about that I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't see the truth. I don't know what to be devoted to. I don't know who to belong to. All those type of questions are going to be hugely coming up with this ingress chart. So when we are looking at ingress charts, obviously we will also want to be looking at is there any planets, are there any planets in the sign of Scorpio and in the sign of Aries? Because Mars is ruling those planets, and we can see that we've got Jupiter there, which is also retrograde. So what kind of that tells me is that, something which seemed to be moving forward is actually going to go backwards, sometimes around the 7th of September. However, we're going to have a sextile between them two, which is going to happen around the 3rd and 4th of September, or at least that's their peak period. So that could talk about some great communication between, let's say, companies or countries, or, I'm going to help you, I'm not going to help you, and so forth. And also what I find interesting is that Jupiter will start gaining strength on 6th degree. Why is that? Because it has got a term strength there. So this Jupiter will be 30% stronger than it is at the moment. So somehow some positive changes happening in September around communication, but I kind of feel like it will be extremely slow, or it kind of will be messed up once Mars goes out of bound, and that needs to be restored somehow. And also demonstration, people are going to be getting frustrated. So this chart is very important. You want to also see when Mars is going to, for instance, start squaring Mercury, because I think that might be a health crisis situation there. Why I believe that is because Mercury is opposing Neptune, so we're going to have a T-square going on. But there, I put my neck on it that when Mars is going to start being on 23 degree, which is, by the way, going to be October, towards the end of October, there is going to be some big scandal happening on the news, that's for sure. But I kind of feel like that's a health crisis situation also. Maybe the surgeons are going to go on strike, or they want pay rise, or, whatever it is. But some medical things, because Mercury and Neptune are opposing, and those are two medical planets. That's how I see this ingression chart. Then I also put up for you the station retrograde chart. So it goes stationary retrograde on the 30th of October. And as you see that it's on 25 degree, where are we? 25 degree of Gemini. Now, what's very interesting here, that did you see that Vesta and Mars in the previous chart, they were actually bang on squaring each other. Now, what I see here is that Mars and Vesta are bang on trining each other. So Vesta somehow plays a significant role in this Mars retrograde period, which is very much about focusing on something which matters. Vesta in the sign of Aquarius is about focusing on humanitarian questions. So interesting. At the same time, Mars will be squaring Neptune. And then we can also see that, oh, by the way, this Mars is also turning retrograde on Aries dwarf again. Now, let me just go back here because we already spoke about that the conjunction between Sun and Mars also happened on Aries dwarf. So there is anger involved here. People are angry, but we are reminded to focus on what really matters, and that's humanitarian things. Mars is still on in conjunction to Pluto, and they were in conjunction also in the conjunction chart too. So maybe another scenario which I was able to imagine is that Russia and Ukraine going to start their kind of like peace deals, but at the same time, we're going to have other countries which are going to be having debates between them too. So it's kind of like falling out of one basket into another one type of situation. That's also how I see this kind of procedure here. So Vesta plays a big role so far in two charts. Now, the fact that Mars goes retrograde on Aries dwarf, it does talk about fights and debates. So it's very possible that other countries will be fighting, as I said. Now, I also put up the station direct chart, which is going to be happening on 8 degree. Where are we? Sorry, here, 8 degree. So now this is actually quite a nice chart because it's nicely trining Venus in the sign of Aquarius. So it could talk about that some political decisions that actually might take us further, and we're gonna grow from those. Why I think that? Because Venus rules the North Node, right, which is on 10 degree. However, we can see that it's squaring the North Node at the same time. So clearly it's something which we don't necessarily like or enjoy much, but it might take us a lot further. Of course, it happens in the sign of Aquarius, which talks about change, which talks about humanitarian vision, which talks about unity and people getting together. It's about a new direction. Of course, it could talk about things such as innovation and so forth, announcing a new system, for instance. So probably there is going to be a new system announced. People are not going to necessarily like that. There is going to be some announcements made, and we don't necessarily like it. And another reason why I kind of believe that's the case here, because can you see that Mars is actually in conjuncting Mercury also, which is a retrograde in the sign of Capricorn. So definitely it's a news which we don't like, but probably in the long run, it plays out great if you like it. And in this chart, Moon is on 27 degree of Virgo. So somehow, again, the medical matters, work conditions are involved here. Which is actually opposing Neptune. Now Mercury and Moon swapped places. So medical matters somehow is still around this time. Whether it's COVID or something new, I don't necessarily know, but something around that topic looks to me very important. Hopefully, food industry also, because Ceres is actually trining Mars too. So maybe it's price locks. They put price lock on items, maybe globally. Or maybe they find ways to negotiate with others to kind of have this swap business. You know what? Give me your potato cheaper, whatever. But some great negotiations might be actually happening around that time. Political decisions, because Mercury, Sun, and Pluto are really close by to each other in the sign of Capricorn. Great. So, do we have any questions so far before I move into the 12 signs? And we're going to take just a few minutes break as well. The money pox, gay blamed for it, and the numbers grows. Yeah, maybe it's the monkeypox. Never know. Mars conjunct North Node on 28th, 3rd. Yeah, in the meantime, I remembered I checked it. So, yes, and then 24th, 02, 20 Mars conjunct South North 5 degree Capricorn. Thank you, Rita. So, do we have any questions, or does anyone else see maybe this retrograde, or any ideas you would like to share before we move on? No? Okay, so let's just take 5 minutes break, a toilet break, and then we move into the 12 signs. See you in 5 minutes. Okay, I am back. So let's have a look at the 12 signs if we don't have any questions. So to summarize on some of the dates, what you should be looking out for on a personal level. What was going on in your life 2021, sometimes around October onwards? That's one of the most important dates because that's when the conjunction happened. What was going on in 2015? Because that's when we had a Sun and Mars conjunction happening in a sign of Pisces. And basically, as we said, those trigger points as well, we had from a Venus retrograde period, which happened in 2020 between May and July. And also we had the North Node going on that period. So on a personal level, you're going to have to look at those points. Because this Mars might want you to tweak on something or cut away something or leave an idea behind and so forth. So let's start with Aries rising sign. So Mars will be sextiling your rising sign, especially if it's between 8 or 25 degrees. And also don't forget to look at those planets, what you have got on 8 degree, 8, 9 degree of Gemini, as well as 25 or 24 degree of Gemini, or any planet in the mutable signs. So we're talking about here Gemini, Pisces, Virgo, and Sagittarius, because those are going to be triggered significantly. And you might want to be looking at, okay, what does those planets actually rule in your chart? What houses? Because maybe, you know, for instance, to give you an example, my Jupiter and Uranus conjunction actually happens on 8 degree of Sagittarius. So that will be very much triggered for me. And Jupiter rules myself, and it also rules my career department. So something around my career department surely will be changing. Yes. Okay, so this is just a little bit of a heads up of what you are meant to be paying attention to. Another thing which I kind of wanted to mention, I just now forget, but it's going to come to my mind. Okay. So, Aries rising sign. So Mars actually will sextile rising sign. The conjunction actually happened in your 7th house, and Mercury will be in your 8th house. So why are we looking at these? Let me just explain again, because the conjunction is the seeding point. That's where we kind of started something. So that was a 2021 October. So you might want to be looking at, okay, Aries rising sign, you have got the 7th house activation, which kind of everything started there. And now you've got the retrograde period, which is going to be happening in the 3rd house for you. So how am I going to combine the 7th house and the 3rd house meanings? So maybe one of the ways how it plays out is that you might be traveling a lot more to make business contracts. 7th house as in contracts, 3rd house as in short distance travels. Or maybe you want to be selling something and you're going to be negotiating a lot more with buyers. Or you might want to be buying something, also a 3rd house meta. So I'm going to be meeting a lot more with sellers. That's another possibility. Or it might be because 3rd house could talk about local businesses too. So I'm going to be actually partnering up with someone to kind of have a local business going on. Or it's also very possible that you're going to have to make a decision about your relationship, whether we are going on in the right direction, or maybe because the conjunction happened in your 7th, so it happens 9 houses away, the Mars retrograde. So it could indicate that, you know what, we are in a long distance relationship. And then what we're going to do next? Are we going to get married? Are we going to move together? Are we going to actually put a stop to this long-term relationship? I mean, long-distance relationship, and then we want to get closer to each other. That's also a possibility here. Maybe it's going to be about that you need to be making a decision whether we want to be actually building a family or we want to be having a child together. And the reason why is because Mercury will be in your 8th house, which could talk about how to share our life together, how to share our resources together, or how to share our resources, as well as it could indicate pregnancy also. Maybe you're going to see that either your car or your partner's car is actually breaking down more often, and then we need to be buying a new car. We kind of like forced in a sense because we don't want to be spending more money on it. Also, it's possible that if you are already in an existing relationship, that, you know what, we're going to be traveling a lot more together in the country. Maybe we're going to go for hiking, or we're going to be climbing, or I just want to learn how to drive, for instance, because I'm tired of my husband driving me around. Or I just want to be having my own car, for instance. But also it's very possible that you are going to be eager to learn about something, and because Mercury will be in your 8th house, the dispositor of Mars at the beginning of that, it's possible that, you know what, I'm asking my partner, can you lend me money to learn new skills because I want to go back to school, or I want to be bringing my own ideas forward. But I don't have the cash for it, for instance, and I really, you know, have got the strong desire to create something. But it does tell you at the same time, because it's retrograde, that I'm gonna have to collect all the details, for instance, about that course, about that car purchase, about moving together with my partner. Not just kind of following my instincts, but looking at the data and the facts as well at the same time. It could also talk about, especially if you were born between 14 to 18 degree of Aries, that you're going to have to look at a little bit your self-esteem as well at the same time. Remember that those people who have got their rising sign somewhere around 24, 25 degree of Aries, that Pluto has been squaring you for a while. So therefore, it could also indicate for Aries, especially within those within 24, 25 degree area, that I want to be actually starting a new job, but I need to be learning a new course, for instance, for it, or I want to have my own business. And Pluto has been trying to break you out of your comfort zone. And it might be bringing in some very challenging situations, for instance, for you at work. So you're going to kind of initiate these. Most of the Aries people are going to be seeing some shifts in their relationship department. That's the number one factor you want to be considering. But it's not just romantic relationship, really. It could be relationship to any of the other people. Another possibility with 3rd and 7th house activation is that, you know, it might be nothing to do with relationship. It might be that your sibling is getting married, for instance, or your sibling and the partner are moving away, and then you are very attached. Or maybe you kind of feel like that, you know what, I don't necessarily get along with the husband of my sibling or the wife of my sibling, and I don't necessarily agree them getting married. Or maybe it's the sibling who is going to be having a child. But then it kind of stirs up some emotions within you. That why am I single? Why I don't have a child? Why does it come to my mind? Because the 7th house is the 5th from the 3rd. So that's the children of my siblings. Okay. Maybe it's the fact that I'm going to be looking after my child siblings a little bit more. That's also a possibility. So this is what I kind of feel like for Aries. Now, when it comes to Taurus, then the conjunction will be the conjunction happened last year in your 6th house. Obviously, Mars ruling your 12th and the 7th house, and it will be actually uh, transiting in your second house, and Mercury will be in your seventh house in the ingression chart. So actually, it could indicate that, you know what, I want to be starting, for instance, a diet, or I need to be reviewing of what I put into my body. Maybe I'm gonna be actually, and the reason why I need to be having a look at my diet. Remember, the conjunction happened in your sixth house, which is very much about health. Because maybe I'm allergic to something. Maybe my stomach cannot tolerate certain type of food. So I need to be, or maybe I just need to be losing weight. Maybe I need to be actually moving a lot more. You might have got you might have got more desire to do a sport, to get in shape, and so forth. Or maybe you want to be actually looking at, okay, how much money am I spending on medical situations? Do I actually need to take all those tablets, or do I want to cut back on something? Maybe it's because you are struggling financially, or maybe just you want to be a little bit more focused on money and so forth. And the fact that it happened in your sixth house, I mean, the conjunction happened in your sixth house last year. There is definitely also a trigger there that, you know what, I'm not happy with my work situation. For instance, I kind of started feeling that I'm burning out when it comes to my work. I kind of don't feel like I'm earning enough money. I'm reviewing my bank statements, and then I kind of feel like that, you know, I haven't been able to save any penny. Do I want to carry on doing this work, or do I want to do something else? Also, it's worth paying attention to any type of incident or accident at the workplace. It's very possible to have arguments with work colleagues, because you might feel like that they are trying to kind of or they might underestimate you, or they might trying to kind of push you to your limits, or you might feel like that they don't appreciate the work you do, and then they just want to criticize you all the time, and then you're getting fed up about that. Maybe it really talks about that you just want to be refining some of your basic needs, whether, you know, because I'm spending too much money on something, or I don't spend enough money on myself and I'm getting tired with that. That's also a possibility, that I spend all these things on certain type of things, and I don't spend enough money on myself, and then you want to change that around. That needs to be actually revisited. Maybe you had some health issues going on last year, and you haven't paid the medical bill yet, and then all of a sudden it's going to pop up, and then you are forced to pay the medical bill, and you kind of forgot about it, or just you didn't think it was going to come that quickly, and then it kind of restrains you a little bit financially. Maybe you kind of feel like that you have to be using up your savings now, and you start thinking about, you know what, in what ways can I boost my financials, because I cannot do this anymore. And think about it, for a Taurus rising, financial safety and security are the top three keywords, what they are very focused on. So Mars is kind of going to trigger that for you quite significantly. Maybe also is just finding new ways of making money, because you just burned out at workplace. Maybe it's actually about you wanting to ask a little bit of help from family members. I mean, second house does connect to family. Typically, it's something to do with the inherited assets from family. But in some branches of astrology, second house does represent family. I'm not too sure if I completely agree with that, but I do agree that certain type of traits come from the second house from a family perspective. So it's very possible that you want to rely a little bit on your family members also. Um, Another thing which is actually possible for Taurus rising sign is that you might feel like that others are actually counting on your support often. And Mars is telling you that maybe I need to be actually cutting ties with those people now. Remember that you do have got the North Node and the South Node running through your first and the seventh house. South Node is in your seventh, which is ruled by Mars. So it does bring the relationship also forward with the fact that Mercury is going to be transiting your seventh house at the same time. So unfortunately, this could also talk about situations where you're going to have some unpleasant conversations with your partner about where the money is going, how much money we are having, how much money you're spending on food, and how much money I'm spending on certain type of things. So this could bring in some financial debate also. Especially, I would say that this is true for young couples because the sixth house is something to do with the beginning of adulthood. Also, Taurus and Scorpio with nodal placements here, which is very much about how we share things and how much I receive from others. So from an emotional point of view, it might be about that I kind of feel like that I give too much to my partner and then I don't receive enough from others. And that's a possibility. Mars does rule your seventh house. So the retrograde is going to be happening 8 houses away from the seventh, which is actually the death of the relationship. So unfortunately, Taurus rising sign might be going through a breakup or some financial settlement, which have been going on for a while, especially if the breakup or the divorce happened last year, but we haven't been able to settle down or settle the financial matters, then this Mars retrograde actually can finish that. If it's an existing relationship, then it might be just about, you know what, rechecking whether the balance between giving and getting is, yeah, there is a balance going on there because it might not be working for you. You might kind of feel like that, you know what, my self-esteem is not as good as it used to be before because I don't get enough attention from my partner. So these are typically, and I feel like that the fact that the conjunction happened in the sixth house, which is also talking about healthy and unhealthy attachments from a psychological point of view. So am I too fixated about something when it comes to relationships and self-worth and what my expectations are? Those could be also important keywords for Taurus rising. Gemini rising, of course, this is going to be big for you because it's going to be happening in your first house. So the conjunction happened for you in your fifth. Of course, the transit is going to be happening in your first house, and Mercury will be in your sixth. So you might be thinking about having a child. Or somehow maybe you're going to be connected with children more. Maybe it's because you're going to become a grandparent. I mean, the first house is a grandparental energy anyway, so you might become a grandparent. That's a possibility. Somehow your children also might be in the focal point. And it might be just because the first house is the ninth from the fifth. So actually, it's very possible that your child is moving away, and therefore you're going to feel a little bit depleted about it, that there is a big distance going on between the two of you. Also, maybe fifth house as in dating, and the first house is you, it might be actually reminding you that, you know what, I need to be putting out myself. I need to be putting myself out there to meet someone. So how am I going to take the dating scene a step further, especially if you are single? Maybe it's about me wanting to get into a creative project. I want to be doing something which is more the representation of myself. So what I kind of mean by that is that, for instance, let's say I am a doctor but I'm very interested, for instance, in Ayurvedic techniques. Then all of a sudden, I want to learn about that more so that I can actually maybe create my own business about it. Because the fifth house is something to do with self-employment at the end of the day. So it might be about that I'm going to be actually learning about new skills. I want to be taking a project further, some type of creative project overall. Also, it's very possible that you kind of feel like that either you are full of energy because the fifth house is something to do with self-expression, or it's kind of like the lack of energy. Fifth house is sport. So it's very possible that I'm going to start doing sports. Maybe it's something to do with things like biking, for instance, or maybe some type of group activities overall, something which is close to you. But clearly, I shouldn't be doing, I shouldn't go overboard with this, because this could also show that I can hurt the body. I mean, Mars in the first house has got, unfortunately, the ability to create some type of accidents. We can break our hand or arm, and so, or even our legs. However, the legs typically is more Aquarian type of energy, and more Aquarian energy and Pisces, but that's actually a possibility also, just because it's hitting the first house. Maybe you just want to be having a little bit of a leaner body. Maybe you want to lose weight because you kind of feel like that, you know what, with the fifth house, it's not really me putting on weight. So I need to get back to the old self. And the reason why I feel like it might be the case for plenty of Gemini, because in the ingression chart, Mercury is in your sixth house. So it might be about that you want to be improving your medical kind of background a little bit, and you figure out that one of the ways is to do certain type of sport. So Gemini will start looking at their vitality level a lot more. Maybe it's that you feel stressed about something that you really cannot, express yourself the way you want to be seen because others are not actually accepting you. Mercury in the sixth can indicate that I kind of feel like judged by others. Maybe you feel like that your children are actually relying on you too much, and you cannot really afford that anymore. And I'm not just talking about from a financial point of view, but you might feel like that you are aging, and I cannot really kind of cope anymore as much. It's also very possible because the first house does bring in the seventh house as well at the same time, right? So even for Gemini, there is a possibility that maybe my partner is doing something which I'm not necessarily agreeing with, and I don't know whether I should be kind of verbalizing that. So I should be expressing myself the way I really feel about it. Maybe the fact that it's the conjunction happened in the fifth house is something to do with flirt, and other people are involved in the relationship, for instance. And it could show that Mars in the first house, that I'm a little bit jealous about it. And Mars retrograde in the sign of Gemini wants you to stand up for yourself, and they want you to fight for yourself in a sense that, you know what, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to actually speak about it. Maybe I have been doing too much for my partner, and I kind of don't feel like it's reciprocated. So I'm going to be not neglecting my own needs anymore. And I'm going to be expecting my partner to somehow do the same for me. Any planet going through the first house indicates that we want to start fresh. So whether we want to be leaving our job behind, which is actually a possibility, because for you, Mars rules the 11th house on one hand, which is talking about my long-term goals. So it's kind of like, I want to start something. Maybe I want to be starting something on social media. Maybe I want to be just changing career and then doing something else in the next 20 years because I've been doing something for a very long time. Maybe I started something in 2015 and I'm getting tired of it. Definitely it does talk about that how will your needs be met without clashing with others? Because if you haven't really taken care of your own needs and all of a sudden you will, it will be a shock to others. And others will be like, what are you doing? You have never done that before. So that's also a possibility. For Cancer rising sign, the conjunction took place in your 4th house. Mars will be transiting your 12th house, and Mercury will be in your 5th. So we've got quite loads of kind of the water houses getting activated for Cancer rising. So definitely on one hand, I'm going to be doing next week a webinar about water houses actually for 8th and 12th house and how they connect. But one way is definitely that I'm going to be having to deal with my inner demons and how I'm going to be kind of winning a battle against my fears and those little voices which are actually whispering into my ear all the time. It's not necessarily about erasing what happened in the past. It's kind of like more about how to integrate those kind of like hard times, what Cancer might have been going through. And Cancer might be going through a very challenging time, especially if your rising sign is above 20 degrees, because Pluto has been opposing you for a while now. And it's very much about getting out of that emotional state of mind and thinking a little bit more positively. Mercury is in your 5th house, right? So it's about thinking the positives, thinking about, you know what, it's me and I can be different. I can create a better future for myself. I can be more optimistic about something. Surely Pluto has been trying to kind of create inner strength for you. Maybe it's about overcoming family issues. Maybe it's overcoming housing. Maybe it's actually that I've been paying the mortgage and I don't have enough, I have nothing left. But definitely on an emotional level, something which might have happened in your family and it's been scaring you. And how are you going to let that kind of negative taste in your mouth leave, in a sense? Maybe unfortunately what the conjunction brought you, that you lost a member of the family and you haven't really dealt with it yet, and Mars actually wants you to deal with it. Maybe actually you dealt with it, but still there is some remains around, such as inheritance matters or selling a property, for instance, or whatever it is. Maybe actually you have been considering to relocate because you just want to be feeling better overall. So the question here is that where do you want to be going? That Mars in the 12th house could bring the desire that I want to go very, very far. Okay. Something which might be disturbing you on a deep level for a very long time, and Mars will want you to find a way to actually win this battle once and for all. Maybe you are afraid of losing a family member. Maybe you are actually afraid of some type of illnesses. And then you want to lock yourself up. Maybe you locked yourself up last year around the winter period. And this time around, Mars wants you to look at whether you want to lock yourself up again, or whether is it worth locking myself up all the time, because the past is always going to get to you eventually. Maybe it's about letting go of your family overall and moving out of the family home also. Maybe it's about, you know what? I've been healing, for instance, my physical body, but I'm not healing myself, physical body because it's Mars, but I'm not healing myself on an emotional, on a spiritual level. So it's the awakening that I should be healing myself also on a spiritual level too. It's definitely talking to you about having a lot more positive mindset overall. It's probably learning to appreciate Pluto a little bit more. Yes, Pluto, as I said, especially if your rising sign is above 20 degree, you might have been very challenged in the relationship department, and this Mars might bring the end of the relationship, by the way, or it might bring in some health issues of the partner, and you're going to have to spend a lot more time at home and then looking after the partner. I would say, especially if the rising sign is on 24, 25 degree, then it's a possibility. Maybe because 12th house, some modern astrology believes that the weather conditions belong to the 12th house. Some others believe it belongs to the 9th house when it comes to weather. You know, which one it is. I might believe that it's actually both, but you might be living in an area where the weather conditions are kind of terrible, and then you are afraid that there is going to be, I don't know, a hurricane or a flood happening. And what if I'm going to be losing my home and so forth? So, loads of fear related matters to Cancer with this Mars, and how are we going to overcome that once and for all? Leo rising sign. As you can see, I did not put down much for Leo, but it doesn't mean we can't. Oh, I didn't put down the thing. So for Leo rising sign, the conjunction actually happened for you in the 3rd house. And Mars will be actually transiting your 11th house. So maybe I should be writing that down so that everyone can have that. So okay, I might do that later. So, first 12. So the transit happens in your 11th house, and the conjunction took place in your 3rd house. So, definitely it could talk about things like, I would like to be actually having a skill to move forward in my life. Maybe I realize that I need technological skills. Maybe I need to learn about internet. Maybe actually I want to be appearing on the internet, and I want to be having an online business overall. So one of the questions definitely brings up for you is that, what role do you want to take on in the society? In what ways do you want to get promoted? It's very possible that you actually want to be having a conversation, 3rd house, about a possible promotion or pay rise, which is 11th house. Because you might feel that either you are underutilized, underpaid, or underappreciated at your work. It's definitely about what you have learned in the last 1 year. And how are you gonna get your knowledge be recognized with others, by others? Because Leo's primary focus is always about being understood, being listened to, being cherished by others, being admired. And the fact that this transit happens for you in the 11th house, which is very much about being recognized by my friends, by a community. So one of the best ways for Leo is that maybe it's about starting an online business overall. Also, it's very possible because the 3rd and the 11th house are the air houses, which is all about connections. So what type of connections have you made in the last 1 year, and how you can utilize that for your own long-term goals? And it's not necessarily about using other people. It's all about somehow sharing, because Leo is a very generous rising sign overall. So, you know what, you scratch my back and I'm going to scratch yours too. So it's kind of like coming up with some type of agreements, verbal written agreements. maybe with a friend of yours that you guys going to start, for instance, a new business together. Maybe it's about certain type of relationships which actually is not working anymore. And we're going to have to actually talk about that. It's very possible to have arguments with friends during this period of time. It's very possible to have just arguments with people overall, because you might feel that they overtalk you or overshadow you, and that's never going to work for Leo. Leo needs to be the center of attention overall. So Mars might want to be cutting off certain type of relationships in your life. Maybe because the 11th house also, especially if you are a business person, and let's hope Leo rising is always a business person, okay? We need to be, with Mars retrograde, we do need to be looking at our expenditure, because the 11th house is something to do with the money made from business. So maybe I want to cut the cost, and Mars is something to do with cuts, right? So maybe I want to cut on the employees. Maybe I want to cut on expenditure. Maybe it's about looking at costs and being a little bit more organized about it. And maybe before I make a rash decision, which Mars in Gemini has got the tendency to do so, I'm going to be actually looking at all the facts, and maybe I decide, what, we don't need 5 people, let's make them redundant. Instead of doing that, can we actually look at other ways to save a little bit more money, because we might have got a chance? Or whatever the situation is, just try to apply that for you. Maybe you have been listening to other people's opinion way too much, and they're just not telling you they're not giving you the right information overall. So you're going to have to be collecting all the necessary data, if that's a possibility. In some instances, Leo might be figuring out or become suspicious about the partner cheating on them. Unfortunately, some Leo rising might experience that. The reason being is because the 11th house is the lover of the partner, okay? And with the 3rd house, which is something to do with information, gaining information, it might be just that we are more suspicious, and then I want to be looking at my partner's phone, and don't forget that Saturn has been going through your 7th house for a while. Hopefully, this is more about going back to the roots, and we realize the need to spend more kind of quality time together with the partner. We need to be having a little bit more fun. We need to be traveling a little bit more if possible. And these type of things. Maybe we need to be socializing more with our friends. We might need to actually speak to a professional person, a little bit of a counseling, because the 11th house is also about kind of like the helpers, the benefactors in our life who can give us great advice. That's why you're going to have to look at with that Mars retrograde that, am I actually listening to the right people, or do I need someone else to kind of give me advice? 11th house is in advisory people, okay? And the fact that, the conjunction happened in your 3rd, it's very possible to have, again, arguments with the siblings, and this Mars retrograde wants you to look at it. If we had arguments last year, then how are we gonna actually, kind of fix that? And maybe a friend of yours is gonna kind of bring you together with your siblings, again. Okay, Virgo rising sign. So the conjunction happened in your 2nd house, and the transit happens in your 10th house now. Now, surely the financial and the career department are coming together. So it's very much about how much money I make in my career. Am I satisfied with that? Am I not necessarily satisfied? It might be that I want to get a pay rise because I just want it. I kind of feel like I deserve it. Maybe it's about that you started a new project, and then now you can actually take it to higher level You might have started something last year, and then it's going to give you now more financials eventually. But I kind of feel like that the Mars retrograde would want you to turn some of the profits back into the business then. In a sense that, you know what, yeah, we just further focus on growth, and I need to be investing a little bit more in that sense. Maybe it's that you've been trying to reach certain type of goals, and then you always ran into some type of walls. And then now I'm going to have to look at my strategy, whether I'm trying to knock down those walls in front of me in the right way or not in the right way. Maybe actually Virgo rising sign, which is about health. So maybe actually I haven't been able to pursue some of my goals because I've had health issues. And it might be a time to actually look at things that, you know what I eat, what I put into my body, how to heal the body, or how to actually still go ahead, even if I have got maybe slight health issues. Maybe it's actually about that I need to be taking a little bit of a time off to reevaluate certain type of things, what I want to do for a living. Maybe it's just dissatisfaction with work. Maybe you have been having challenges with your boss. Maybe your boss has been promising you to give you pay rise and it hasn't happened. And then it's kind of like then the Mars can be a pressure cooker. And then one day I kind of lash out on my boss. You've been telling that for a year, so don't come up to me telling me again, because I don't believe you anymore, and so forth. I feel like plenty of Virgo will be changing work directions in the next 1 year, surely. Maybe it's about the fact that I just need to be making some adjustments when it comes to my goals because I'm not reaching them. So something needs to be changed overall. Now, it might be a new idea you need because Mars does rule your third house here, right? Which is about ideas, which is about a good old chit chat. So you might be, and Virgo is kind of like a silent. It's not silent sign, but because it's talkative sign, but it talks quietly. Sometimes they don't even hear it. So are you speaking loudly? Are you speaking loud enough so that you are heard? And that could be actually an important matter here. Maybe that you've been having the desire to change something in your life and you have been scared to do that. Remember that the opposite sign, Jupiter, is going to go back into your 7th house. So especially those who have got their rising sign on 28, 29 degree of Virgo, they might also experience some challenges in their relationship department. And because Mars rules the 8th house here, which is very much about sharing. So this Mars does tell you that you're going to have to share your frustrations with others. You're going to have to speak about them. But also, you might just need to be giving strength to others. How I'm going to pioneer others. Maybe it's just about pioneering others to do a better job when it comes to workplace, for instance. That's a possibility. Let's move on to Libra, which is also going to be quite an important period for Libra as well, just because they also had this conjunction, right? So and then now they're going to have to deal with some of the Sun and Mars opposition phase 2. So the conjunction happened in the 1st house, and the Mars transit happens in the 9th house. So definitely, what did you learn about yourself? How do you put that out into the world? But also, what else do you want to learn about yourself and how are you going to do that? It's very much about building on the profile you started a year ago. And now you might want to be revisiting some of the missing pieces and actually learn about those. Maybe you have been studying astrology, for instance, because ninth house is an astrological house, right? It's the house of divination. It's the house of dreams, but dreams in a sense that dream interpretation. So decoding these, words and stuff like that. So, but something might have got lost in the translation, and then now I have to be actually revisiting some of those. Ninth house is about publishing and books and all those type of things. Well, because those are about decoding a message, right? It's about languages. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm, studying a language. It's the language of your body when the first and the ninth house are getting kind of combined. So the signals, what my body is giving out in a verbal or emotional or in a psychological way, but those need to be somehow translated. Maybe you have got a personal project which you want to put out in the world. Maybe you decided that you want to be, I don't know, working or selling a product on Amazon. That could be great with the first and the ninth house activation at the same time. Something like that, coming up with a plan. Maybe it's because Libra is the first house, which is partnership. It's actually very possible that you are ready to get married the second time. But it's also possible that you just want to be partnering up with someone so that you achieve your own dreams. Or maybe it's just that you want to be having a reading with someone who is going to decode a message for you. And then all of a sudden, things are going to make sense overall. Ninth house is legal matters. So it could really indicate that there is something which I want to make official. Maybe that, I'm a writer and then I'm publishing a book. Then that becomes official. And then I have to be coming up with or maybe I've been thinking about relocating and then I need a visa and I make it official. I decide about it. Maybe ninth house could represent paperwork. So maybe it's the finalization of your marriage or your divorce or waiting to get the official paperwork about something. And unfortunately, a retrograde can indicate it's going to get thrown back at you at first because some details are actually missing there. It also can indicate that you have got the desire to travel. And in that case, that Mars wants you to make some insurance here. Okay. Because it can indicate accidents abroad, for instance. So have an insurance. Don't have the similar situation like I had now, because I didn't make an insurance to come to Thailand, and now I broke my leg. And I paid for it. It wasn't a fortune, but still I was like, oh, if I had insurance, I shouldn't have paid for it. So that Mars might want you to have insurance there, especially in the next 8 months at least. It's very possible that you want to be, or by accident, you break the law. And unfortunately, the law is going to catch up on you. Watch out for things like administration while you are traveling. Make sure that your passport is valid or your visa is still valid, or look it up actually. Do I need visa? Because sometimes they change things just 2 days before we travel. It happened to me as well. Not that long ago, I ended up having to spend 1.5 days extra on the airport because I messed up. I checked the wrong stuff in regards to my visa in Turkey. So those are all kind of third and ninth house activations, and you're gonna have to be actually mindful about that. It's also possible for Libra rising conjunction happened in your first house. Don't forget that. And Sun rules your 11th house. And that's another way how we can actually think about it, that you look at the Sun's rulership as well, especially with that conjunction to get a clearer picture. But it's very possible that, my long-term goals are changing and I want to be putting, for instance, a business into a foreign country. So all these matters could be actually important for Libra. Let's move on to Scorpio rising. So Scorpio, the conjunction happened in your 12th house, and this transit is happening in your 8th house. So the water signs are quite heavily activated actually by this Mars retrograde. I think it's going to be the hardest on the water signs, water rising signs. I just want to put it out there because the water houses are getting activated quite strongly, which is always about dealing with our emotions. And we can be overly emotional. We can be crying quite a lot. And for Scorpio, some crap wants to come on the surface overall. And we're going to have to let go of some very deep trauma, fears, insecurities overall. Otherwise, it might be a challenge. Why is that? Because Mars is in conjuncting your rising sign. Especially if your rising sign is on 8, 9, or 24, 25 degree. But even if it's between 8 and 25 degree, Mars will be 3 times in conjuncting your rising sign. So letting go of things is going to be one of the biggest keywords for Scorpio. Plus, maybe you're going to have to let go of some of your egotistical approach, because you do have got the South Node going through the first house, which is very much about, you know what, I'm going to give up on some of my expectations and I'm going to focus on others a little bit more. Now, Mars is also asking you to do that. Otherwise, Scorpio rising sign might be experiencing some unpleasant moments in relationship departments, not just personal, but the relationship with others overall. Maybe you have been kind of feeling weak. Maybe you kind of feel like that something is actually sucking the life out of you. And Mars is asking you to cut those away or cut it out. If it doesn't serve me anymore, why am I holding on to it? Now, Mars transit in the 8th, Scorpio rising sign, both the house and the sign are very stubborn. So I'm going to have to give up on that stubbornness. What am I stubborn about? Maybe it's related to obsessions. Maybe it's related to fear. Maybe it's related to trauma. Maybe I have been drinking. Maybe I've been taking drugs, or maybe I'm addicted to food or medicines. And I might not need all those. So something needs to transform when it comes to your approach to life, when it comes to how you look at the world overall. Maybe you want to change career also because you have been tired of doing the same stuff. I mean, because the conjunction happened in the 12th house, which is the 4th quadrant, right? So the 4th quadrant talks about the public status. It's kind of like a workhouse in a sense that I'm working on a creative project. Hopefully you've been working on a creative project for a while, and you just have to be revisiting and spending a little bit more time on it. Maybe you're going to have to redo some of the work around that project you've been doing. Maybe you have been struggling to find some joy in life. And the Mars retrograde wants you to actually share moments with others, because the 8th house is always about sharing. Now, Mars rules your 1st house, right? So it wants somehow to share a piece of you with others. So you're going to have to do that. Also, it's very possible that you have been sick around that conjunction when we had it last year also. Conjunction happened in your 12th house. Mars rules your 6th house. So that's the medical axis overall. So it might be something which actually comes back, or it needs to be operated. Or maybe you haven't been careful about it, and somehow you're going to have to deal with some of the consequences. Maybe also Chiron has been in your sixth house now for a while as well. So the health situation for Scorpio rising sign is like your attention needs to be dragged there. How you treat the body, what you put into the body. Do you know that your body is your temple? Especially, I would say that around September for Scorpio could be a little bit of a health crisis. Okay, just because the moon will be impacted by transit Mars in the ingression chart. Maybe it's about not you, but maybe about your partner who is going through some challenging times, and then you're going to have to give up a little bit of your own personality and you're going to have to be at the rescue of them. That's a possibility. Sagittarius rising sign. So the conjunction happens in your 11th house, and the transit happens, conjunction happened in your 11th house, and the transit happened in your 7th, or happens in your 7th. So this could talk about that, you know what, I'm living my life to the fullest. I've got my plans and I'm doing all these long-term matters, which I kind of started, but I might be ignoring my relationship a little bit. And the partner might not like that. So maybe what happens in the partnership is that we might feel that we are on different roads. We don't have like the same plans. So how are we going to align the plans? That needs to be somehow revisited. Maybe actually it's 11th house as in advisory people, 7th house as in legal matters. It's very easy to get into some legal debates, legal arguments about others. So that needs to be paid attention to. Maybe 11th house as in long-term goals. You started a project last year, and the 7th house Mars now wanted to kind of finish it, to start a collaboration with others. Or maybe you're going to have to look at how you actually go about it. Maybe actually you are full of fears about starting this project because Mars does rule your 12th house. You're going to have to let go of some of your fears. 12th house, 6th house, 9th house, 3rd house, all related to knowledge. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that is because Saturn is going through your 3rd house, right? So it might be about the fact that you kind of feel like that your knowledge is not enough, and that's why you don't start that project, or somehow the self-esteem is actually a little bit depleted there. So you just postpone things. In that case, Mars wants you to get out there in the public. 7, 11th house. You started it, you're going to have to finish it up. But it does tell you at the same time to revisit some of your knowledge as well, though. What are your long-term goals? Maybe you need to realize that, you know what, I cannot do this alone. I need someone else to help me with it. So who are you going to partner up with? Maybe your friendships are, some maybe are gonna go away, or maybe you're gonna kind of feel like that, you know what, let's say 7th house can indicate a second home. So imagine that you moved somewhere, and then you kind of feel like that with that Mars, that the friendships are not as easy to build as I kind of expected. So this might bring up challenges there. Maybe some of your friendships actually will be finishing also. Also, Sagittarius rising sign might experience relationship issues in a sense that, like, oh, let's do open relationship, or I figure out that my partner is actually, maybe not satisfied sexually, because the 5th from the 7th is the sexual desire of the partner. And maybe we're going to have to revisit that. Mars is a sexual planet, right? So it's very possible that it's going to be more of a communication. Also, the 11th house shows the desire of the partner wanting to have a child, because that's the 5th from the 7th. Maybe that's going to be on the plates to talk about. Maybe the partner wants to have a child. Maybe you are not so confident about having a child. Don't forget that Mars rules your fifth house also. So this children topic could be on the horizon for Sagittarius rising too. Okay, let's move on to Capricorn. So Capricorn, oh, why did I not color it for you nicely like I did in previous ones? So I'm gonna color it. So the conjunction happened in the 10th house for you, and the transit happens in the 6th. So again, the work houses are pretty active for Capricorn. So it might be about that you want to be making, again, changes in your career. Maybe you feel burnt out. Maybe you're going to have to look at your daily routines, whether you strain yourself way too much and then you ignore other areas of your life. Maybe actually the fact that you get a performance review, 10th house, that you are not as efficient as you were before. You are not performing the tasks as well as you used to. And what is going on? Maybe actually you are worried that your job is going to be finishing or the company is going through a certain type of phase. And, but definitely this wants you to focus on your well-beings a lot more. Maybe I just need to be working smarter and not hard. Maybe you feel like maybe you have been, kind of you are burnt out at your workplace and actually you want to change. And it might be causing actually physical health for you already. Also, especially those who are doing manual work, they need to be paying attention to possible accidents and incidents again at work. It's very easy to have an argument with Mars in the 6th house with bosses and just overall work colleagues overall. Or maybe some of the work colleagues are quite sneaky. As I said, Mars in Gemini, it's very possible to encounter with sneaky people. And kind of like they're going to snitch us up to the boss because I was, I don't know, 5 minutes late. So how are you going to boost your energy level? Maybe actually that you had to take time off from work because of medical issues. And then it's time to get back to work or think about how to get back to work, actually. So looking for a new job is a possibility with this. 6th house is something to do with daily routines as well as something to do with medical matters, but also how organized we are. So Mars might want you to kind of create a little bit of an order in your head, even though Gemini doesn't rule head, but it does rule the brain. So a little bit of an order in your brain. Maybe you are very scattered, you are not focused on things. Maybe you are extremely worried about the stability of your workplace. And that needs to be, or those needs to be revisited. Mars, which represents cut and bruises and accidents in the 6th house, really need to be paying attention to car accidents and all those type of things. It can cause migraine, inflammations in the body. So Capricorn, watch out for those. Aquarius rising. So the conjunction happened in the 9th house and the transit happened in transit happens in your 5th house. So again, what have you learned in the last 1 year? Did you learn anything about your higher self? Did you learn something spiritually? Did you focus on reconnecting with your higher self a little bit more so that you can express yourself better, to be more well-rounded about something? Maybe it's about receiving some type of recognition overall. 5th house as in recognition in a sense, and the 9th house is studies. So you might finish up a course and then you get a diploma, or a reward overall, or you get chosen as the best student, and so forth. Maybe actually with the Mars retrograde, you're going to have to retake an exam because it wasn't as successful, unfortunately, as you expected. Maybe actually that you're going to become a grandparent also. Ninth house is the grandchildren, fifth house is your own children. Maybe your child is going to start a new relationship and somehow that's going to be affecting you. Maybe the fact that the child is going to move out. Saturn is going through your first house. But clearly this could talk about you starting to study something new as well, which is a lot closer to your heart. Fifth house. Maybe it's about sharing, overcoming some of the fears, Saturn in the first, share ninth house, a creative project of your own with others. It's time to share something you might have learned recently. So it could talk about starting a new business as well, building up on something. Maybe you wrote a book and that needs to be published. Fifth house rules books and CDs. You might have done a CD, a music CD, and that's what you want to be launching. Maybe you want to be going on YouTube. That's also a possibility. Becoming self-employed could be definitely a case with Aquarius, just because Saturn goes through your first house and Saturn is a work planet. But I kind of feel like that surely overcoming maybe challenges, or maybe your partner is afraid that you're not going to make it or something, those need to be cut away and you're going to have to be a lot more optimistic about something. Maybe you're going to have to cut away some people's opinion, which are actually not the right opinion, and you're going to have to start listening to others. And last but not least, Pisces rising sign. So the conjunction happened in the 8th house and the transit happens in your 4th. So I did speak about Pisces a little bit already at the beginning as an example. Selling, buying a property is very possible because the 8th house is about making money. And the 4th house is out of properties, out of family. Unfortunately, it's possible for Pisces rising sign that they're going to have to go through inheritance matters, or maybe there is going to be some type of tragic happening in the family department. That's unfortunately a possibility. But also, from a positive point of view, that you're going to have to relook at your investments. Is it right to invest into properties nowadays? Or maybe it's not the great time yet, and I need to be choosing another investment type. Why? Because Mars rules your second house also. To be frank, I am looking at other things than just putting my money into properties. Yeah, I do. And not just because of Mars, but I've been saying that I think property is not going to hold up forever. So I just sold 2 of my properties because I feel like it was time to do that. Maybe it's actually you want to be earning money somehow from home environments. Maybe, the 4th and the 8th house is the 5th from the 8th. So it could talk about working from home. That's a possibility. Maybe you have given money to a member of the family and it's time to get it back. And maybe you don't see that the money is ever kind of going to come back. However, the Mars retrograde would be kind of telling you that it's coming back to you, if that's possible. It's also possible that unfortunately you're going to be having arguments with family members, especially around, maybe home and inheritance matters or money matters. And another possibility for Pisces rising sign is that they are going to be relocating. Again, that desire to go very far, maybe actually to a faraway place overall. Because Mars rules your 9th house too, which is about traveling. Now, it's possible that you're going to have to go back to your own country for some reason. Maybe it's because of family members are having issues, and then you decide to go back and be helpful. So we got to the end of it. That was the presentation about Mars in Gemini. I hope you guys learned a lot from it, and then it gives you something new to think about. And don't forget about the relocation astrology certification course, which is actually coming up very shortly. In about 9 days' time, we're going to be starting, I think. Yeah. So, yes. Any questions at all from today? Oh, Rita says she had a terrible year in 2015. Sorry to hear. You know, do you have any planet around 14, 15 degree of Gemini? Would be interesting to hear that. Um, oh, sorry, not 14, 15, 23, 24 degree of Gemini. Do you have any planet on there, or just the mutable signs? What made 2015 a bad year? Pluto 24 degree. Okay. Okay, so that could be a challenge, yes. So, now maybe you received some ideas of how to overcome the Mars challenges, and, revisiting some of these to make it a little bit better so that it's not going to be as challenging anymore. Great. Thank you very much, everyone. It will be uploaded also. So see you very soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.